Good morning and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim as we continue reading Flying Against Time with Chapter 9. Well, why shouldn't the professional gamblers bet against me if their judgment points that way? Asked Ted Scott in response to Bill Thombley's statement. That simply means that in view of the many difficulties in the way, they think I won't be able to overcome them. Yes, but on the other hand, that's your record, returned Bill. You've never made a failure yet. You've got everything you ever tried for. As I look at it, it points to the probability that you'll keep the slate clean by winning this race against time, too. In one way, yes, replied Ted. On the other hand, there's the law of averages. On general principles, I'm about ready for a break, and perhaps they think it's coming now. Put it another way, said Bill. Here's a racehorse, for instance. He's won half a dozen races in succession. He comes to the 7th race. Is the bulk of the betting going to be on him or against him? On him, of course. Exactly, said Bill. That is, if the race is straight. But if, when you got to the track, you found that all the big money was being bet against him, what would you think? That they had some kind of inside information that he was going to lose, admitted Ted. Well then, continued Bill triumphantly, if, despite your victories and your unbroken record, they're betting against you and even offering odds that you'll lose, isn't it because they have some inside information that you're going to lose? How can they know that? Because the word has been passed down the line that you're going to be made to lose, declared Bill earnestly. In other words, they're cooking up something to stop you from winning. Something dirty, something crooked, something dangerous. Those birds don't bet so recklessly unless they think they got a sure thing. Take a tip from me, Ted. They're going to try to beat you before you ever set foot in the plane to start the race. Ted Scott was startled. He had been so busy with his work that he had paid practically no attention to the course of the betting. In a general way, he knew that large sums were being wagered, but he had assumed that these were at even money. This would represent a fair difference of opinion. But he had not known that odds were being offered against him. It was not an odds-on proposition. That hardened and unscrupulous professional gamblers were freely offering odds against him would seem to imply, as Bill Thombley suggested, something under the surface. And that something could be only ominous and sinister. I'm glad you told me this, Bill, he said after a pause. I've had some local trouble along that line already, but I had thought that it would be confined to this town. And he went on to tell his friend of the dropped brick and the doped gum. Bill Thombley listened with a grave face. That's bad, he said. But as you say, that's local. You had those birds jugged and they were out for revenge. But they're amateurs and not as dangerous as professional criminals. The crooked gamblers will do things on a big scale. I wish, Ted, that this race were over, or better still, that you'd never engaged in it. Well, I'm in it up to the hilt, replied Ted. For that matter, I wouldn't draw out of it if I could. I'm going to see this thing through, Bill, and I'm going to win. Those professional gamblers will laugh out of the wrong side of their mouths when they find that they've lost their coin. I won't be asleep while they're trying out their bag of tricks. So forget it, Bill, and come up with me for a spin on my new machine. I've got it in mind to show you some speed that will make your hair curl. Is that a threat or a promise? It's a promise, laughed Ted. I know what a speedhound you are. At about the time this conversation was going on, another of a different tenor, but still having Ted Scott as its subject, was taking place in the sumptuously furnished private apartment of Brewster Gale in the Hotel Excelsior. That man was sitting at his desk with a deep scowl on his heavily jowled face, as he glared at his two sons, who were sprawled out in their chairs, with looks on their faces that were half sheepish, half defiant, and wholly uncomfortable. A pretty mess, snapped Elder Gale viciously. Here I am, up to my neck in about $10,000 worth of bets against Ted Scott. If you'd done your work as you ought to have done, I'd be sitting pretty now. Oh, come off it, growled Greg. "Didn't we do just what you told us to do? Didn't I slip that dope gum into his pocket? Didn't Duck drop that brick?" "Bunglers, both of you," snapped his father. "Dropped the brick and it didn't hit him. Slipped the gum in his pocket and left it with a cigarette of a brand sold only here that may afford him a clue and get us into a heap of trouble. Bright boys you are. Couldn't even lick him when you were 2 against 1. He took me by surprise," growled Greg. "If Wellman hadn't interrupted, I'd have soaked him pretty good and plenty," mumbled Duck. "What's the use of all this beefing anyway?" asked Greg sullenly. "The fact is that he's still safe and sound. Bad luck to him. What comes next? Where do we go from here?" Brewster Gale's face was a mirror of evil passions. He sprang to his feet. "Blessed if I know," he said. "You're not going to quit now when you've put up nearly $10,000, are you?" asked Greg, with a thinly concealed sneer. "Why not get somebody in from outside?" suggested Duck. "There are plenty of fellows who would do anything you want. For $1,000 they'd put him in the hospital." "Do you mean import thugs?" asked Brewster Gale, at the same time looking around nervously to see if the windows were closed. Duck nodded. The elder Gale considered that for a moment, then shook his head. "No, that would be too raw," he said. "You know how popular that fellow is. If Ted Scott were deliberately injured, the people would never rest until they had run down the man who did it. And if he were caught, he'd preach on us. Even if he weren't caught, he'd have a club over us and could blackmail us for the rest of his life. No, whatever happens to Ted Scott must take the form of an accident." "That sounds easy," grumbled Greg, "but accidents don't grow on every tree." Brewster Gale pondered for the next 5 minutes while his sons waited skeptically. "If we could wreck that plane of his, it would be just as good as putting him personally out of commission," he said at length. "He couldn't possibly build another one in time for the race, and if he doesn't start by the day set, he loses." "Nothing doing," Greg said gloomily. "We can't get near it in the daytime, and at night there's a guard set about it. I heard that a bunch of Ted's friends at the works, Jack Forrest, Mark Lawson, Breck Lewis, and others, are taking turns at night in watching it. You've got to think up something better than that." "Why not let somebody else pull our chestnuts out of the fire?" suggested Duck in a discouraged tone. "You don't suppose we're the only ones interested in downing Scott, do you? Look at the professional gamblers who have bet their piles that he won't win. Do you suppose they're going to trust to luck when there's a surer way? Not on your life. I'll bet some of them are planning right now how to put him out of business. You wait and see." "Duck's got a point," muttered Greg. "Getting cold feet, are you?" sneered their father. "Depending on others to do what you're too cowardly or too fat-headed to do yourselves? Suppose the others don't do it. Then I'm $10,000 in the hole." "Not if I know it. Look here. An idea's come to me just now. Listen." His voice sank almost to a whisper. And that's the end of Chapter 9. We'll continue next week with Chapter 10, On the Brink of Peril. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.